Naruto's life had always been one marked by isolation, whispers, and glares that cut deeper than any kunai. But imagine now, if the same boy who carried within him the great burden of the 9 tails was born not into the name Uzumaki, but into the lineage of the Uchiha. The Uchiha, one of the most powerful and most prideful clans in the history of Konoha, carried within them a reputation that stretched across generations. Their Sharingan, a Kekkei Genkai feared and respected alike, was said to be a mirror of the soul, capable of reading movements, copying jutsu, and even manipulating reality itself. To place Naruto's spirit, loud, fiery, and indomitable, into the body of a child born of this clan would not only change his destiny, but ripple through the entire timeline of shinobi history. As a child of the Uchiha, Naruto would have grown up not in a lonely apartment on the edge of the village, but in the Uchiha compound, surrounded by the high walls, the stern traditions, and the weight of expectations that hung heavy upon every member of the clan. The Uchiha were not a warm family in the open, cheerful sense of the word. They valued discipline, dignity, and the pride of their bloodline above all else. For a boy like Naruto, who was reckless and impulsive, this would have been both a curse and a blessing. On one hand, he would have felt less of the raw isolation that plagued him in his real life. Instead of walking streets where villagers shunned him, he would have been tethered to a clan whose name already carried prestige. But on the other hand, the whispers would have been different. They would not have merely called him a demon child, but a contradiction, an Uchiha with the fox inside him. The clan elders would have regarded him as both an opportunity and a liability. An opportunity because the 9 tails sealed inside an Uchiha host could one day create a shinobi unlike any other. A liability because the volatile emotions of a Jinchuriki combined with the dangerous power of the Sharingan might one day bring disaster upon them all. Within this tension, Naruto's childhood would have taken a vastly different shape. He would not have been ignored. Instead, he would have been watched constantly, his progress measured, his failures magnified. The elders would place pressure on him from the start, demanding that he uphold the Uchiha name. Yet, within this harsh upbringing, there would still be warmth, for not all Uchihas were cold. Imagine Naruto, growing up alongside Sasuke, not as rivals separated by circumstance, but as true brothers. They would spar in the courtyards under the watchful eye of the clan, their fists and kunai clashing, their tempers flaring, yet their bond deepening with each encounter. Sasuke, who always sought strength and recognition from his father, might find in Naruto both a competitor and a source of frustration, for Naruto's wild, untamed energy would clash with Sasuke's precision. And yet, that bond of rivalry, now sharpened by clan pride, would push them both forward. Itachi, too, would be a figure in Naruto's life, not as a distant prodigy admired from afar, but as an older brother figure within the clan, who occasionally took the time to guide the younger ones. Itachi's soft words and quiet eyes might carry a special weight for Naruto, who yearned for recognition and stability. In moments when the clan treated Naruto with suspicion, Itachi might be the one who offered him the rare kindness he craved. This bond would matter greatly in the years to come. But even within the Uchiha, Naruto's personality could not be contained. Where other children carried themselves with the calm pride of the clan, Naruto would still be loud, brash, and unafraid to speak his mind. This would make him both an embarrassment and a spark of chaos among his kin. The elders would scold him. Fugaku Uchiha would look at him with disappointment, and Sasuke might roll his eyes at his antics. But beneath it all, Naruto's laughter would echo through the quiet streets of the compound, a sound rare and almost alien among the stoic Uchihas. The academy years would unfold differently as well. Naruto, still burdened with the Nine Tails, would not be a natural genius like Itachi or Shisui, but his sheer determination, combined with the natural prowess of the Sharingan, would push him further than in the original story. His pranks would remain, though perhaps directed at the more rigid rules of the Uchiha household, rather than just the villagers of Konoha. And when he sparred with his classmates, the awakening of his Sharingan would set him apart much earlier than expected. Imagine the moment when his eyes first flickered red, Tomoe spinning faintly within them, while Iruka watched in shock. The child once dismissed as a failure would suddenly reveal himself as something terrifyingly rare, an Uchiha Jinchuriki with a growing Sharingan. Of course, his relationship with the villagers would still be strained. No matter his clan name, whispers about the Nine Tails would never vanish completely. But within the protection of the Uchiha, he would be shielded from the harshest cruelties, his confidence never fully broken. And that small difference, having a place where he belonged, even if imperfectly, would ignite in him a sense of pride. He would not just dream of becoming Hokage to prove his worth to the village. He would dream of it to prove that the Uchiha could stand at the very center of Konoha, unshackled from suspicion. As Naruto grew older, his bond with Sasuke would sharpen. They would fight side by side, pushing one another, and the rivalry would burn brighter than ever. Yet unlike in the original story, where betrayal and loneliness tore them apart, here their paths would remain aligned, for their roots were bound to the same soil of the Uchiha compound. Their differences would remain, but instead of being split by pain, they would be sharpened into strength. And so, the boy who once wandered the streets alone would now walk them with his clan's crest upon his back, with eyes that carried the power of the Sharingan, and with a fire inside him, not only from the Nine Tails, but from the pride of the Uchiha name. Already, destiny itself seemed to tremble at the thought of what he might become. Growing up as an Uchiha, Naruto's life was still defined by contrasts, yet in a way that felt more balanced than his lonely canon childhood. He was not completely isolated, but neither was he fully embraced. The Uchiha clan, proud and united, tolerated his presence, but always with that subtle air of hesitation, that unspoken recognition that the beast sealed within him was something unpredictable, something dangerous. Yet Naruto, unlike before, was not cast out to wander alone in the cold. He had children around him, cousins and clanmates, and even if they sometimes whispered about him, he was not entirely starved of human connection. This made him a little less desperate for acknowledgement from strangers, but still hungry to prove himself in his own way. What was fascinating was how the Uchiha elders approached his existence. To them, Naruto was both a burden and a potential gift. As an Uchiha with the 9 tails sealed inside of him, he could become a weapon to rival anything in history, perhaps even a savior for the clan in their quiet struggle against Konoha's leadership. But he was also volatile, his temperament fiery, his chakra unpredictable. They wondered, would he grow into a second Madara, or into something even more uncontrollable? Thus, they watched him carefully, advising Fugaku to keep him within arm's reach, but never fully trust him. Still, not everyone viewed him with suspicion. Shisui Uchiha, gentle and perceptive, saw the boy for what he was, a child craving to be understood, a spirit that burned brightly rather than darkly. Shisui often took Naruto with him on patrols around the compound, or sat with him under the sakura trees near the Naka River, teaching him patience and balance, encouraging him to see beyond anger. Where others saw only the shadow of the fox, Shisui saw the glimmer of hope in Naruto's resilience. This bond planted seeds in Naruto's heart that would later bloom into something that kept him from falling into bitterness. Then there was Itachi. Quiet, brilliant, always carrying the weight of responsibility. Itachi could not help but see Naruto as someone who shared a burden similar to his own. Both were children forced to grow in the midst of tension, both carrying expectations that were far too heavy for their age. Itachi trained with Naruto on occasion, not because he was ordered to, but because he wanted to guide him. He taught Naruto the subtle philosophy of the clan, the strength of seeing the world not only through power, but through perspective. And though Naruto was fiery and impatient, his presence warmed Itachi's often lonely path. Naruto's relationship with Sasuke was another anchor in this alternate story. Instead of being rivals, divided by bitterness and different paths, they were raised as brothers in the same clan. Their bond both sharpened and deepened by their shared bloodline. Sasuke admired Naruto's boldness and his ability to push forward without fear, while Naruto admired Sasuke's discipline and talent. Their sparring sessions were legendary even as children, 2 Uchiha heirs battling in the training yard, fire jutsu clashing, and kunai ringing against one another. Where in the canon timeline, Naruto often chased after Sasuke from a distance, here they grew side by side, each pushing the other higher, never allowing the other to rest for long. This closeness meant that Naruto's early development was far different. As an Uchiha, he awakened his Sharingan sooner than expected. His emotional drive, his constant need to prove himself, and his deepening bonds with Sasuke and the rest of the clan all contributed to his eyes blossoming earlier. At first, it was just one tomo flickering faintly, then two. And by the time he was nearing the age for the academy, his Sharingan was already stable enough to be used instinctively. This changed everything. He wasn't just the vessel of the Nine Tails anymore. He was a prodigy in his own right, someone who carried both the most destructive force in Konoha and the signature ability of the Uchiha clan. Of course, this did not go unnoticed by the Hokage and the higher-ups in the village. Hiruzen Sarutobi, wise and cautious, watched with deep concern. He remembered the night of the Nine Tails attack vividly, remembered Minato's sacrifice, and knew the potential danger of combining the beast with the Uchiha bloodline. He worried what could happen if Naruto's loyalty strayed from Konoha, if the whispers of rebellion within the Uchiha compound one day captured the boy's heart. Danzo, ever more ruthless, saw Naruto as both a threat and an opportunity. To him, Naruto was not a child at all, but a tool. And he began to wonder if Root should make efforts to control or even claim the boy. These undercurrents of suspicion shaped Naruto's early academy years. Unlike in the original timeline, he did not sit in the back row being laughed at for his poor grades or silly antics. Instead, he was seen as intimidating, even inspiring awe in his classmates. Some admired him for his strength, others avoided him because of his temper and the stories about the Nine Tails, but no one dared dismiss him outright. His rivalry with Sasuke became the talk of the class. Two Uchiha cousins, each fiery in their own way, competing for the top spot. Naruto wasn't the class clown anymore. He was something else entirely. Yet despite the pride, despite the Sharingan, and the whispers of his potential, Naruto never fully lost that vulnerable core. He still longed to be acknowledged, not just as a weapon, not just as an Uchiha, but as Naruto himself. That longing, combined with Shisui's guidance and his bond with Sasuke, prevented him from falling into arrogance. Instead, he worked harder, trained longer, and dreamed bigger. He began to think not only of surpassing Sasuke, but of surpassing Itachi, of proving to the entire world that the Uchiha name could shine not with fear, but with hope. It was in these formative years that the great divergence began to unfold. In this timeline, Naruto was not simply an orphan chasing acknowledgement from strangers. He was an Uchiha child standing at the crossroads of fate. His power was undeniable, his bonds were strong, and the choices he made would shape not just his own future, but the destiny of the Uchiha clan and Konoha itself. Naruto's growth within the Uchiha compound began to reveal itself in subtle yet profound ways. Unlike in his original childhood, where loneliness and rejection often guided his actions. Here he was anchored by the weight of heritage. He was not simply the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, but Naruto Uchiha, a boy tied to the clan's traditions and burdened by both suspicion and expectation. Fugaku watched him with measured eyes, noting the way the boy's chakra flared in training, often unstable yet brimming with potential. Mikoto, ever gentle, tried to soften the boy's rough edges, encouraging him to see himself not as cursed, but as chosen. It was a perspective Naruto had never heard before, and though he struggled with it, it began to shape his self-image. He still had the same loud voice, the same unshakable energy, but now it was framed by the knowledge that his clan stood behind him. Kakashi Hatake was assigned to oversee much of his early shinobi development, while Naruto, in another life, might have been placed on a team with Sakura and Sasuke. Here his path shifted. The Uchiha elders had pushed for specialized guidance, someone who could handle both the volatility of the Nine Tails and the delicate balance of Uchiha pride. Kakashi fit this role seamlessly, and his tutelage became one of the greatest gifts Naruto could receive. Under Kakashi's quiet, sometimes aloof guidance, Naruto began to channel his chakra with more precision. The Sharingan within him, not yet awakened, stirred faintly during moments of stress, its presence like a sleeping ember waiting for the right spark. His bond with Sasuke deepened in these years. Though they had always shared proximity as clan members, this alternate reality gave them more time together. Sasuke, normally brooding and competitive, found in Naruto a partner who could match his stubborn will and fiery drive. The two clashed often, sparring in the training grounds with shuriken and taijutsu until exhaustion forced them to collapse side by side in the dirt. These battles weren't rooted in animosity, but in mutual respect. Each wanted to surpass the other, and in doing so, they grew sharper, stronger, more refined. Naruto's reckless energy often balanced Sasuke's precision, and Sasuke's calm strategy often tempered Naruto's wild instincts. Together, they were beginning to form a bond of brotherhood that was unbreakable. The village watched this development with mixed emotions. Some still whispered about the Nine Tails sealed within him, remembering the night of destruction. Others, however, saw his Uchiha surname and hesitated to voice their doubts too loudly. The political tension within Konoha, the mistrust between the Uchiha and the village leadership, meant that Naruto's existence as both Uchiha and Jinchuriki became a delicate point of balance. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, observed from afar. He often wondered if this path, though fraught with risk, might actually strengthen the ties between the Uchiha and the Leaf. Naruto's resilience had already softened some of the village's disdain, though not completely. Still, for a boy who in another life was shunned, here he was at least granted a fragile respect. As Naruto's training advanced, moments of breakthrough began to emerge. One such moment occurred during a sparring session with Kakashi. Frustrated with his inability to keep pace with Sasuke's speed, Naruto's emotions surged. His chakra erupted in waves, golden sparks laced with the faint glow of the Sharingan beginning to stir in his eyes. For an instant, his vision sharpened. Kunai in motion slowed, and he could predict Sasuke's strike before it landed. Though fleeting, this was the first time the Uchiha blood in him visibly revealed itself. Kakashi halted the fight immediately, recognizing the awakening for what it was. Sasuke, startled, stared at Naruto with a mixture of envy and awe. It was the first reminder that Naruto's path, though similar, was not the same as his own. This awakening did not come without consequences. The clan elders, always cautious, saw Naruto's potential as both a blessing and a threat. His combination of Uchiha blood and Jinchuriki power could be the key to cementing their strength within the leaf, or the spark that ignited a greater conflict. They debated in hushed tones, some arguing that Naruto should be carefully guided, others whispering that he was too dangerous to control. Yet Mikoto stood firm, insisting that Naruto was not a tool, but a boy deserving of care. Her voice, along with Itachi's quiet support, often silenced the harshest criticisms. Itachi, in particular, became an unspoken influence on Naruto. Though their interactions were limited, Naruto looked up to him with wide admiration. Itachi's calm presence, his kindness amidst strength, resonated deeply with Naruto. In another life, Naruto might have idolized Jiraiya or dreamed of surpassing Hokage figures. But here, Itachi was his North Star. He longed to be strong enough to stand beside him, to protect Sasuke, and to uphold the clan's honor. Itachi, though burdened with secrets, treated Naruto with quiet encouragement, subtly guiding him without revealing the storm he carried within. Naruto's relationship with the Nine Tails also began to shift in this alternate path. With the support of the Uchiha, he wasn't left to face the beast in isolation. Fugaku, stern but pragmatic, introduced him to the concept of control, teaching him about the Sharingan's unique ability to suppress the Nine Tails chakra. Though Naruto had not yet awakened his full Sharingan, the knowledge that such a possibility existed gave him hope. For the first time, he felt that the monster within could be confronted not as an enemy, but as a challenge he might one day master. And so the years pressed forward, each day carving Naruto into a different shape than destiny had once intended. He was still brash, still loud, still filled with boundless dreams. But he was no longer alone. He had sparring partners, mentors, and family who stood by him. His Sharingan flickered with promise, his bond with Sasuke grew unbreakable, and the Nine Tails inside him simmered with a restless energy that would one day redefine the shinobi world. The village's future was already shifting in quiet, unseen ways. And Naruto, the boy who bore both the Uchiha name and the weight of the Nine Tails was at the very center of it. Naruto's growth within the Uchiha clan was not only physical and technical, but emotional as well. His bonds with Sasuke deepened over time, though they were filled with the sparks of rivalry, often ignited by small moments that carried immense weight. A shared look during training, the thrill of surpassing one another by the smallest margin, or the sting of defeat. All of it tied them together in a relationship unlike any other. They were brothers by clan and brothers by choice, walking a path that would shape the very future of Konoha. Yet beneath that rivalry was a sense of kinship that neither of them could put into words, the feeling of someone else who truly understood them. Kakashi noticed this immediately when he began training Team 7. While in the original timeline, Naruto struggled to keep up with Sasuke, here he was not trailing behind, but moving step for step. Kakashi's eye, ever analytical, saw that Naruto's Uchiha bloodline had given him both an innate skill and a clarity of focus, as though the Sharingan heritage had sculpted his determination into something sharper. He wasn't a reckless boy, charging headlong into battles he couldn't win. Instead, Naruto was deliberate, his movements calculated, his fire jutsu more precise, his taijutsu steadier. This didn't mean his boundless energy was gone. It was still there, but now it was tempered, guided by the teachings of his clan and the instincts of someone who carried both a great burden and a great gift. When Team 7 took on missions, the dynamic shifted dramatically from what it once was. Sakura, though still developing, found herself inspired not only by Sasuke's presence, but by Naruto's discipline and persistence. She could no longer dismiss him as the loudmouth or class clown. His Sharingan training and Uchiha lineage commanded a natural respect. And Sasuke, for all his pride, could not ignore that Naruto was on his level. The rivalry that blossomed between them did not carry the same bitterness, because there was no need for Sasuke to look at Naruto with contempt. Instead, it became a rivalry that sharpened them both, pushing them forward together. This was most apparent during the Land of Waves mission. On that mist-shrouded bridge, when Zabuza and Haku tested their strength, Naruto was not simply an inexperienced child fumbling for courage. He fought with conviction, his Sharingan awakening for the first time in the heat of battle. It was a single tomo, but even that one tomo shifted the tides. He could track Haku's speed with startling clarity, his movements no longer lagging hopelessly behind. When Sasuke's own Sharingan emerged during their struggle, the two of them stood back to back, their crimson eyes spinning in unison, creating a sight that left Kakashi both astonished and wary. Two Uchiha children, bonded by fire, carrying within them a power feared across the shinobi world. Together, they pushed Haku to his limits, forcing a draw that kept both of them alive where once one might have fallen. That mission changed Naruto. He had tasted the reality of death, seen the fragility of life, and understood that shinobi walked a path where tomorrow was never promised. But rather than discouraging him, it hardened his resolve. He didn't just want to be strong for himself or for his clan's honor. He wanted to be strong to protect the bonds he had, to make sure Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, and everyone in the village never had to fall to despair. That feeling merged with the natural will of fire that burned inside him, the flame that had been part of his soul since birth. It was now intertwined with the pride of the Uchiha, creating a unique duality. He was a boy who carried the will to protect everyone, but also the eyes and power that demanded he carry it through with precision and force. The Chunin exams brought this into sharp relief. While the exams were always a spectacle, Naruto's presence as an Uchiha raised the stakes. The other villages watched with keen eyes, whispering amongst themselves that the Uchiha were producing not one, but two prodigies. When Naruto entered the Forest of Death, he displayed tactics that were both cunning and bold. He wielded his Sharingan not only to anticipate his enemies, but to control the battlefield, coordinating with Sasuke in a way that made them seem like extensions of each other. Where Sasuke struck with precision, Naruto struck with overwhelming force. Where Naruto held the line, Sasuke exploited openings. And in the preliminaries, Naruto's fights carried a weight far beyond simple advancement. His duel with Neji, the genius of the Hyuga, was no longer a matter of proving a loudmouth underdog could rise to greatness. Instead, it became a clash of two elite bloodlines, two heirs of ancient Konoha clans whose philosophies often opposed one another. Neji, with his belief in destiny and unchangeable fate, clashed against Naruto, who embodied the freedom of the will to rise above circumstance. But Naruto was not only willpower now. He had the skill and precision of an Uchiha warrior. He fought Neji to the brink, forcing the prodigy to realize that fate was not an absolute wall, but a fragile idea that could be shattered by persistence and bonds. Naruto's victory was not only symbolic, it was decisive. By then, the whispers of the village had shifted. Naruto was no longer just a Jinchuriki whispered about in shadows. He was Naruto Uchiha, a boy of crimson eyes and blazing will. The kind of warrior Konoha had not seen since the days of Shisui, or even Itachi in his youth. The elders took note. The other clans took note. And even the Hokage felt a flicker of cautious hope. Perhaps this child, bearing both the burden of the Nine Tails and the power of the Uchiha, could one day be the bridge between the old wounds and a new future. But even as Naruto grew, the shadows did not retreat. Orochimaru still moved in silence, watching the Uchiha children with keen hunger. His obsession with Sasuke was matched only by a budding interest in Naruto, for here was a child whose Sharingan and Jinchuriki power made him a prize unlike any other. And within the Akatsuki, whispers spread of a new generation of Uchiha, stirring ancient fears. Naruto, unknowingly, had painted a target on his back simply by existing and thriving. The seeds of fate were shifting. And though Naruto's bonds were stronger, though his resolve was deeper, the trials that awaited him would demand more than even the Uchiha name could guarantee. He was stepping into a world that would soon test the limits of his will, his power, and the bonds that tied him to the people he loved most. In the days that followed their return from the land of waves, Naruto felt something shifting deep inside him, as if the bonds he was building with his team were slowly weaving into something stronger, something that resonated with his Uchiha blood. He had fought alongside Sasuke, protected him, and had been protected by him in return. The two boys, who had once stood across from each other as rivals, now stood shoulder to shoulder, as if fate itself demanded it. Their bond was strange, half competition, half unspoken brotherhood, and Kakashi could see it growing sharper with each passing day. Where one pushed, the other pulled, and together they rose higher than they could alone. The Uchiha in Naruto thrived on this rivalry. His Sharingan, which flickered to life with greater stability now, found its greatest training partner in Sasuke's own evolving eyes. They sparred in the training fields, fire against fire, genjutsu weaving and breaking, taijutsu clashing in bursts of intensity. Sometimes Sakura would sit and watch, awestruck by how far her teammates were leaping ahead, and Kakashi could only marvel at how quickly these children were pushing each other to greatness. It was not lost on the elders of Konoha. Whispers traveled through the village. Naruto, the boy with the 9 tails inside him, was also an Uchiha. Some feared what he could become, while others secretly admired his progress. The name Uchiha still carried weight. And now, with 2 heirs of the clan training under one teacher, many wondered what path lay ahead for the village. Naruto himself cared little for the politics of it all. He only cared about becoming stronger, about proving his worth, about standing tall enough that no one would ever look down on him again. But this time, his drive was not just for recognition. It was also for the bonds he had forged. He wanted to be someone who could protect them. Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, and even the village that once shunned him. As the Chunin exams approached, Naruto and Sasuke both entered with quiet determination. The forest of death tested them harshly, yet with 2 Sharingan users watching each other's backs, their survival was less a question of if and more of how. The 2 boys fought in unison, their movements overlapping, their instincts blending into a rhythm that seemed almost unnatural. Enemies who underestimated them quickly realized that they were not facing children, but heirs of a clan whose power still lingered like fire in the dark. When the preliminaries came, Naruto's fight against Kiba was transformed by his Uchiha blood. His Sharingan read Kiba's movements easily, predicting attacks before they landed. What would have been a scrappy, unpredictable battle became one-sided. Naruto calmly dismantling Kiba's offense and finishing the fight with a clever substitution and a devastating counter. Yet it wasn't arrogance that carried him. It was composure. The Sharingan sharpened his mind, his emotions steadied by years of hardship. Even the crowd, who once laughed at him, grew quiet, watching the once clumsy boy stand like a true Uchiha shinobi. Sasuke, too, advanced, but for the first time, he felt a strange fire in his chest. Naruto was not just catching up. He was threatening to surpass him. The rivalry that once motivated him now became something more pressing, more personal. He could not allow Naruto to take the light that was meant for him. Yet deep down, even in his bitterness, Sasuke could not deny the pride that flickered when he watched Naruto fight. Their growth was mutual, their strength intertwined, and in some strange way, Sasuke felt less alone. The exams were interrupted, as they always had been, by Orochimaru's sinister shadow. His interest in Sasuke lingered, yet when he observed Naruto, his curiosity deepened. The boy was not only the container of the Nine Tails, but also an Uchiha with the Sharingan already awakening. To Orochimaru, Naruto represented not just power, but potential, a living experiment that had somehow surpassed expectation. His snake-like eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Orochimaru considered what it would mean if he could bend this boy to his will instead of Sasuke. But Naruto was different from the usual Uchiha. His heart, tempered by loneliness, but also strengthened by bonds, was not so easily swayed by whispers of vengeance or promises of strength. When Orochimaru confronted them in the forest, his presence radiating fear, Naruto's first instinct was not retreat, but to stand in front of Sasuke, his eyes glowing crimson with the Sharingan's light. His chakra flared, and for a moment, Orochimaru saw something uncanny, an echo of Madara's gaze, but softened, reshaped by something the original clan head had never known: compassion. It was only a brief encounter, yet it shifted the path forward. Orochimaru marked Sasuke with the cursed seal, as in the original timeline, but his eyes followed Naruto long after the battle ended. Two Uchiha heirs, one consumed by fire, the other tempered by bonds. Either could serve his goals, and he would not rest until one of them fell into his hands. The invasion of Konoha unfolded much the same, yet Naruto's presence altered the tempo. When Gaara transformed into his monstrous Shukaku form, Naruto stood beside Sasuke, their combined Sharingan blazing. They fought in tandem, Naruto's instinctive bravery balancing Sasuke's precision. Together, they managed not only to subdue Gaara, but to reach him on a deeper level, Naruto's words striking the sand shinobi's lonely heart with even more weight. For Naruto was not just a Jinchuriki. He was an Uchiha who had known the same isolation, who carried the same burden of being both feared and despised. Gaara's eyes widened at his words, and though the battle left them both battered, a seed of change was planted in Gaara that would bloom differently than before. By the time the dust settled, Naruto was no longer seen as a nuisance. He was an Uchiha, a hero of the invasion, and a boy whose Sharingan promised a future where the clan's name would not fade into obscurity. Yet even as he stood proud, he could feel the gaze of enemies lingering on him. Orochimaru, the Akatsuki, and even the wary eyes of Konoha's elders. His existence was becoming too important, too unpredictable, and too dangerous to ignore. And Sasuke, watching from the shadows of his own thoughts, realized the rivalry had shifted once more. He was not sure if he was chasing Naruto or if Naruto was chasing him. All he knew was that their bond was drawing them both toward something greater, something inevitable. As the seasons shifted in Konoha, the bonds that Naruto forged with his comrades grew ever stronger. He was no longer seen as the lonely boy chasing after acknowledgement. He had become a pillar within the village, a flame that refused to flicker out no matter how harsh the winds blew. Yet, within that flame burned the essence of the Uchiha. His Sharingan had matured, now a 3-tomo mirror of truth, and with each battle he engaged in, it sharpened further, pulling him toward a destiny both familiar and unfamiliar. For an Uchiha, power was not merely a gift, it was a burden. And Naruto could feel its weight pressing upon him even as his laughter still rang bright through the training grounds with his teammates. The Chunin exams had long since passed, but the echoes of those battles lingered in Naruto's memory. He recalled how, in this altered timeline, his duel with Neji Hyuga had unfolded with an entirely different tone. Where once he had relied only on raw willpower and instinct, now his Sharingan had given him clarity. He had seen Neji's movements as if in slow motion, piercing through the fate-bound genius's defenses with precision. It wasn't just determination that had carried him. It was skill, honed through long hours under Kakashi's watchful eye, where the power of the Uchiha and the unpredictability of Naruto's spirit had blended into something uniquely his own. That victory had not only shaken Neji's perspective on destiny, but it had cemented Naruto as someone destined for far greater things in the eyes of the village. But with power came temptation, and with the Sharingan came whispers. The Uchiha were remembered as both protectors and betrayers, and Naruto sometimes found himself standing alone beneath the great monument of the Hokage faces, staring at the carved stone visages, wondering which path he was truly walking. He carried the blood of the clan that had nearly destroyed Konoha, but also the will of fire that longed to protect it. The tension between these truths stretched within him like a taut string, vibrating in every choice he made. Sasuke, too, noticed this conflict, though his own burdens often drowned his ability to speak of it. Still, in quiet moments between missions, Sasuke would sometimes glance at Naruto's eyes, glowing faintly red in the moonlight, and think to himself that perhaps Naruto's burden mirrored his own more than he cared to admit. Their rivalry intensified. Training sessions between them shook the earth, their fists colliding with echoes of both brotherhood and competition. Kakashi, watching them spar, often found himself marveling at what he saw. Naruto's Sharingan was unlike Sasuke's. It was not sharpened solely by loss or revenge, but by his burning desire to protect bonds, to protect everyone he cared about. Kakashi understood, then, that Naruto was rewriting the very path of the Uchiha. Where the clan had long been haunted by the cycle of love leading to hatred, Naruto's heart refused to bend to bitterness. And yet, the potential of that heart, so vast, so unyielding, also frightened him. Because what would happen if Naruto's spirit one day cracked under the pressure? What kind of storm would his Sharingan unleash? The answer seemed to draw nearer as the threat of the Akatsuki grew. Word spread through the villages of rogue ninja, gathering in shadows, their eyes set on something larger than any single clan. Their leader, cloaked in mystery, commanded figures who each could devastate entire armies. Kakashi, Jiraiya, and the elders of Konoha began to whisper of preparations, knowing that a storm was on the horizon. And in the heart of that storm, both Naruto and Sasuke would stand. The difference now was that Naruto, with the Uchiha blood flowing in his veins, represented a level of power the village could scarcely comprehend. He was not only the container of the Nine Tails, but also a scion of one of the most formidable bloodlines in shinobi history. It was during one mission, set deep within the forests bordering the Land of Fire, that Naruto truly began to grasp the scale of his gift. Team 7 had been ambushed by rogue ninja, their tactics sharp, their numbers overwhelming. In the chaos, Sakura had been cornered, a blade glinting inches from her throat. Naruto's eyes had widened, and in that instant, the world had slowed. The Sharingan spun faster than ever before, and something inside him cracked open. His vision deepened into black and red, and the pattern shifted into something new, an evolution of power that had eluded Sasuke up to that point. Naruto had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, not through hatred, but through desperate, unyielding love for his comrades. He struck down the attackers with precision and fury, the air rippling with the weight of his chakra, his eyes blazing like molten stars. When the dust settled, Kakashi understood the gravity of what had happened. The Mangekyo was a gift that came with a curse, a power unmatched, but a toll unbearable. Naruto, however, seemed oddly calm, his chest heaving, but his gaze still filled with warmth. It was as if the Mangekyo had not been born from grief, but from hope itself. Yet Kakashi knew this was a dangerous precedent. If Naruto could wield such power without losing himself, he could become the greatest shinobi the world had ever seen. But if that balance slipped, even for a moment, he could become the most terrifying threat Konoha had ever faced. Sasuke, upon learning of Naruto's awakening, felt a pang of both envy and admiration. The rivalry that bound them now burned hotter than ever. But unlike in another timeline, where envy would twist into bitterness and betrayal, here the rivalry was tempered by trust. Sasuke did not retreat from Naruto's growing strength. Instead, he pushed himself further, determined to match his brother in spirit stride for stride. The two of them grew in parallel, each ascent driving the other higher, their bond reinforcing instead of fracturing. The village, watching these two young Uchiha rise together, began to see in them the promise of a new era, an era where the tragedies of the past might finally give way to something brighter. But even as their power grew, darkness loomed ever nearer. The Akatsuki's movements were becoming bolder, their search for the tailed beasts more ruthless. Naruto, as the host of the Nine Tails, would soon become their primary target. And with his newfound mangekyō, the stakes were higher than ever. For the first time, whispers arose not only outside Konoha, but within it. Could Naruto's power truly be trusted? Was he an Uchiha who had overcome the curse of hatred? Or was he merely walking a slower path toward the same inevitable tragedy? These questions hung heavy in the minds of the elders, even as Naruto laughed and trained with his team, blissfully unaware of the seeds of doubt being planted in the shadows. The battle with Obito and Madara was not only a clash of philosophies, but also a clash of lineage, of dreams born in different eras. Naruto, as an Uchiha, stood as something that never should have been. Hope, where there should have been hatred. Unity, where there should have been division. It was in this paradox that he drew his strength, wielding his Sharingan and his indomitable heart as if both were gifts meant to be joined. Fighting beside Sasuke, the bond between them no longer strained by betrayal, but strengthened by shared purpose, the two became something that even Madara could not easily predict. For while Madara had once believed he understood the depths of the Uchiha, here was Naruto, standing as proof that their story could have been written differently. Naruto's Susanoo rose into the battlefield not as a looming weapon of destruction, but as a shield, immense and radiant, pulsing with the same warmth that had always been his strength. His version of the technique carried his personality. It wasn't cold and grim, like many others, but alive with energy. Its ethereal armor glowing faintly, as if infused with the sun. He wielded it not only to attack, but to protect, using its wings to block the attacks meant for his comrades, sheltering those who fought beside him, as though his very will had extended outward to form a barrier. It was here that the Uchiha bloodline merged with Naruto's unwavering spirit to create something that had never existed before. Obito, watching from the shadows of his own broken convictions, faltered. He saw in Naruto a mirror of what he might have been if he had not surrendered to despair after Rin's death. The boy's Sharingan blazed with conviction, but there was no emptiness behind it, no hollow ache driving him toward endless vengeance. Instead, it was fueled by bonds, by the desire to protect even at the cost of his life. This contradiction shook Obito in ways that no words ever could. He had told himself for years that the Uchiha were doomed to fall into hatred, that the cycle could never be broken. But here stood proof, undeniable, that love and loyalty could reshape even the curse of their clan. As the great battle raged, Naruto's bond with Sasuke became the fulcrum upon which the war turned. Together, their teamwork surpassed even their legendary predecessors. Naruto's Sharingan foresight and Sasuke's precision wove together, their movements complementing each other until it was as though two souls were fighting with a single body. They anticipated attacks before they came, countered each strike with fluidity, and used their rivalry not as a wedge, but as a catalyst, each pushing the other to greater heights. The Shinobi Alliance watched in awe as the two young Uchiha became symbols of hope, as if destiny itself had bent to allow this moment. When Kaguya finally emerged, her overwhelming presence threatened to smother even their combined strength. Yet it was Naruto's role as both Uchiha and something beyond it that made the difference. He was able to meet her gaze without faltering, his Sharingan piercing through illusions, while his natural stubbornness and optimism refused to give way to despair. Side by side with Sasuke, they sealed her, their actions not born of rivalry, but of trust. It was a trust that only could have been forged in this alternate life, where betrayal had never cut their bond, and where Naruto had grown up understanding not only his own loneliness, but the burdens of his clan's legacy. When the war ended, the world looked at Naruto differently. He was not just the child of prophecy, not only the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, he was also an Uchiha. And in that duality, he carried a message more powerful than any speech. His existence proved that the Uchiha legacy did not have to be one of destruction, that the Sharingan could be a tool of protection, not domination, that bonds, when nurtured instead of broken, could lead to strength unimaginable. For the first time in decades, the Uchiha name was not spoken with fear, but with reverence, as if the sins of the past had finally been given a chance to heal. In the quiet that followed, Naruto did not retreat into solitude. He walked among the villagers with the same openness he always had, smiling, laughing, sharing warmth. Children looked up to him not just as a hero, but as proof that the Uchiha were not monsters, but people capable of kindness, courage, and joy. For Naruto, it was never about changing his name or rewriting his past. It was about showing that one person's choices could reshape the fate of an entire clan. Years later, when peace had begun to settle across the nations, Naruto often found himself reflecting beneath the Hokage monument, staring out at the village that had once rejected him, but now embraced him fully. He thought of his father, Minato, and how proud he might have been to see his son not only carry the will of fire, but also cleanse the shadow of the Uchiha name. He thought of Itachi, who had borne the heaviest burden alone, and how perhaps, in this timeline, his sacrifice could finally rest in peace. And he thought of Sasuke, his eternal rival and closest friend, whose presence had sharpened him, tested him, and ultimately helped him grow into the person he was meant to be. Naruto had always dreamed of becoming Hokage. And in this world, he did. But as an Uchiha, it meant something different. When he took that mantle, standing tall, with the Hokage cloak billowing around him, the people saw not only their leader, but the embodiment of reconciliation. He was a bridge between two legacies, proof that the past did not have to dictate the future. For every smile he shared, every promise he kept, the Uchiha name rose higher, no longer weighed down by tragedy, but lifted by hope. And so, in this alternate story, where Naruto was born as an Uchiha, the cycle of hatred found its end not through endless wars, but through bonds, resilience, and the courage to defy destiny. The village that once feared the Uchiha now trusted them again, not because of words written in history, but because of one boy who refused to let go of his dream. One boy who showed that even the darkest eyes could reflect the brightest light.